the Jordans every year, the new ones came out, even the ugly ones. There are a lot of ugly ones. There are like a lot of bad Jordans out there, by the way. But like, it doesn't matter. It was an event. People had to, line up and do it. And it was just a thing, it was, I think the beginning of the hype culture. We're going to have a limited edition drop. We got to go do this. And I liken it to, to a band that underplays. I remember when Bruno Mars first started blowing up, like they deliberately, a lot of bands do this, but, deliberately underplayed, like 500 seat venues, 1,000 cap, type of things, when they could have been doing amphitheaters, 4,000 or 5,000, and maybe selling like 90%, 95%, making more money. But, they underplayed. They did, these tours early on. Like maybe there wasn't really more than one album worth of stuff to sing. So it's like, cool, we'll do this. We'll have like a couple openers or something, and we'll build up demand. And then the next tour, you go straight to arenas. And I think that's the way to do it. That's what I think Yeezy ultimately did to become as huge as it was. I mean, like we were saying earlier, Reebok was maybe too focused on selling shoes instead of telling the story. I would also add, it was a weird time to be getting on the Jay-Z train. He was about to retire, and he was about to go become an executive, which is really cool and was great for him, but also not like the thing that people want to go and buy a shoe about, like, oh, I want to have the sneaker that the dude in the corner office wears. Like, I don't know about that. I think you want to wear the shoe that somebody wears who's playing basketball or like is, at the forefront of fashion or something like that. You don't want the old guy sneaker. And that's kind of what it was. And Jay-Z was transitioning into that role. And he himself, if you think about his career, I divide it into old Jay-Z, new Jay-Z, which is, not as stark, let's say, as Kanye, old Kanye, new Kanye. But I put the dividing line around 2003, and that's when he shifted from this kind of nonstop, shock and awe approach, album every year, flooding the market, much like Reebok, to the more of the scarcity model, not putting out an album every year, maybe not even putting out an album every 2 years. Now it's like 5 years between albums, something like that. But, doing more exclusive stuff, champagne, cognac, whatever. And, he had already realized that he was kind of going to go in that direction. But Reebok was still sort of paying him and promoting his shoes in the old way. And so, I think there was a bit of a disconnect there. And again, that's why, even though it sold really well, there wasn't going to be that kind of longevity. I think also, if you start out with a shoe that is kind of boring, maybe people buy it at first because it's new and different. It's like, I think he was the first non-athlete that they gave a shoe deal to, so that's cool. But when you start out with a boring shoe, like, how are you going to like really revise it every year to be new and different? Like when Jordan came out, the silhouette, I mean, the colors, everything, it was really different, right? And so although you could see a through line through all the Jordans, much like you could see in the design of a Porsche 911 or something, they're all different, but like you can see like the baseline of a silhouette. There's something exciting there. And when it starts out exciting, you can more easily go to other exciting places. When it starts boring, you can't just sort of like completely redo it and I guess you could, but it becomes something else. And it really felt like a one-off shoe. So unless you become the Adidas Samba or something like that, that's just a staple that everybody wears all the time, you're not going to have that like evergreen demand. And I think probably that's what went wrong for Jay-Z. It's interesting to look at the S. Carter sneaker that Reebok put out and compare it to the G Unit. Very similar, I think, both very boring shoes. And they both have that like little script on it with the G Unit or S. Carter logo. I think that's part of it, even though you had, I think Jay-Z and 50 Cent were touring together that summer, and you had all this stuff coming together, but it was like, where's it going to go from there? It just wasn't like that interesting a shoe. And I guess the last thing is, it didn't say either of their most well-known names on the shoe, right? It didn't say Jay-Z, it didn't say 50 Cent.
Right.
And I wonder if that somehow capped it. I mean, it's weird. I don't know. It somehow feels like a little corny for a shoe to say Jay-Z or 50 Cent on it in a way that it doesn't for it to say Michael Jordan or LeBron James. So I don't know, but I wonder if that, somehow kind of capped the potential in one way or another in the long term, even though they both did well. and sold like hotcakes in the beginning.
Yeah, I think the point that you also made about just like Reebok's mentality about selling shoes versus Nike's about telling a story could help capture a lot of this, right? Because if you're focused on selling units and you're counting beans, you're like, okay, well, these beans work out great. Let me go push more of them, as opposed to thinking more broadly about it. Yeah, that's a really good point. And the thing is, in terms of the other artists, it's like they did so much to try to capture it, right? You had the quote out, you had the best rapper alive who was about to retire. You had the hottest rapper in the world at 50 Cent. And then they tried to reach into all these other demos too. You had Lupe Fiasco, so you had the backpack rap covered. You had Daddy Yankee, so they were trying to lean into the Latino and reggaeton market. And they had Pharrell as well, so they were leading a bit more into just everything he was doing. This was right around the time that he had Billionaire Boys Club. So to Reebok's credit, they definitely tried to cover the bases. But yeah, I mean, for the reasons that we discussed, things just didn't quite click there. And this is actually interesting timing because this is around the time that Adidas comes into play. So the official Adidas transaction, it actually happens in 2006, but the deal first gets announced in 2005. But the executives say that they've been talking about it for a couple of years now. And part of the attraction that Adidas had to Reebok was all the stuff that we're saying. Reebok had the cultural influence in North America, a market that Adidas wasn't as strong in. Adidas was very strong everywhere in the world, just given everything they've done with soccer and soccer's global footprint there, even some aspects of running as well. But Reebok, in many ways, wasn't as strong as that. So that, in principle, was the thought of why they wanted to acquire. But unfortunately, it didn't quite turn out that way.
It is ironic, right, that Adidas, which is so steeped in the history of hip hop, going back to my Adidas and Run DMC and all that, you know, the first endorsement deal given to a hip hop act by a sneaker brand, $1 million, and was it in the mid 80s? I mean, it's kind of wild that Adidas, you know, I guess went through a period of dormancy in the United States at least, and that that it, you know, felt like perhaps acquiring Reebok might help boost its prospects in hip hop and with the youth market and things like that, and you know, I guess to go back to the Jay-Z and DMX analogy in prior episodes, we talked about how, you know, them putting out 2 albums within a year, both within a year, helped Def Jam fetch a higher premium. I wonder, you know, if you kind of looked at the numbers, did Jay-Z and 50 Cent's shoes also help juice the number that Reebok got when Adidas eventually came in? And, you know, maybe there was a momentum there that could have been sustained if Reebok had stayed independent. You know, I do think that Adidas thought like, oh, we can have these two brands kind of compete with each other in a healthy way. But I think ultimately, you know, Reebok got kind of crowded out. And, you know, maybe some of the juice that they had, you know, whatever juice they had from Jay-Z and 50 Cent, which, you know, we're talking about, maybe it was doomed to be temporary. You know, maybe it was less about sort of the nature of the juice and more about what happened on a corporate level afterward.
Thanks for watching Trapital on YouTube. If you enjoyed this clip, please make sure to check out the full episode that's available on our channel. And while you're at it, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll get all the updates on all the clips, videos, and breakdowns that we have on Trapital.